Was life better back in the olden days? When we look back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s, I have a lot of people in my comment section who say these were the golden era. People say it as people who were alive in that time. People say it looking at that time as younger people and make a judgment. But everybody's quick to decide one way or the other. Some people go straight into the concept that these were the golden years and everything since has been worse for this reason, that reason, and every other reason. Some people would like to say nothing but the opposite and say, no, we had it super tough back then and now is the pinnacle of human evolution. As a species and as a society, it could be argued that we are always moving forwards, but that may not always be a good thing. Look at the way that AI is going and how it's leading to people being more lonely due to spending so much time on the internet. That's just one front where things may have become worse. But we want to look at a more comprehensive view. How is the world today in comparison to the times of the past? Because this is a really divisive subject and I want to give my personal opinions on it. So I think the first thing that we need to acknowledge when we talk about a subject like this is the fact that the past had problems, the present day has problems, every generation, every time period has problems. People like to say that the 1950s, 60s and 70s was an era of good jobs, good unions and all of these great things. And whilst that may be true, there are a lot of things good about today's society. There are also a lot of problems from the past that we don't experience anymore, and a lot of problems from the present that would not have been felt by people in the past. The trouble I think when we speak about a subject like this is there is such an age divide that people can't even comprehend each other's problems. And I feel like, as a society, neither set of problems is perhaps more or less valid than the others. But let's just have a look from a modern perspective and see where the world is now. A lot of young people think that houses are super expensive, jobs are pretty poor and the jobs market is quite weak. They see the fact that they can't afford very much and feel disappointed by it. At the same time, old people say that we had to work hard in difficult physical jobs that we didn't even want to do ourselves. And I think this is where there is a bit of a divide. Because like we spoke about a couple of days ago, in certain parts of the country, even in the UK, right, you can still buy fairly affordable property. If you go out to Wales or Scotland, even the north of England, you can get relatively affordable property. And if you look at where houses were, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, the actual houses themselves, just look at houses built in this time compared to new builds, a lot of the time they are smaller and worse. I know a lot of new builds are very poor quality, so I'm not going to say otherwise, but think about this. Think about how much heat old houses let out. Think about living conditions back in the day, how worse technology was, how much more difficult jobs were. It's all well and good to talk about good paying stable jobs, but how many people in today's world would be happy working down a coal mine for 12 hours? I know today's market is challenging, but just like there were issues back in the day, there are issues now. And just like there were solutions back in the day, there are solutions now. The reason why this argument I think is so divisive is because it makes each generation pass the guilt onto somebody else. Because we do have a lot of issues. As someone growing up in my generation, I do feel like the jobs market is weaker and weaker. I do feel like houses are going to be increasingly unaffordable to a number of people. At the same time, there are solutions to this. For instance, in the day and age that we're in, we can make an income online, working half the hours or less. I'll give you an example of myself. I'm not saying this as someone who doesn't know. I run a few online businesses, and from my own online endeavours, I make as much as the average UK salary. And this is from working a lot less than a 9 to 5, a lot less. It's just one example of how the modern day has its own solutions. Opportunities in some fronts are disappearing, but new ones are opening. We talk about AI destroying all of our jobs, but at the same time it may create new ones. Now this might sound like I'm going out on one avenue. It may sound like I'm saying that the olden days were worse because this was tough and that was tough. But all I'm trying to say here, as a pretense to this big point, is that Every generation had its problems, and even as older people, I feel like people tend to look back on the past as years of greatness, when in reality, whilst that may have been the case for them personally, it may not have been the case for society as a whole. From the research that I have done, we see things like the 1980s, where there was periods of mass unemployment here in the UK for large amounts of people. We're talking about entire streets and communities unable to find jobs. And today's jobs market is difficult in its own regard. Look at things like the 0 hours contracts that we've spoken about countless times before, and the gig economy, where workers' rights are just, well, you guys already know. Yes, houses are proportionally more expensive. I'm not going to deny any of these facts. But all I am going to say is, our times come with their own trouble. And I go back to the point of houses quickly. Because there is this expectation in today's world that a big nice house is what we get straight away. And in a lot of cases it either isn't or shouldn't be. I think one thing that as a society we are seeing a lot more, I am experiencing this in my generation, not for me personally because I don't do this, but a lot of people that I know have this sense of lifestyle inflation which pushes up their cost of living. They have very expensive cars on finance that they just don't need. They have very expensive mobile phones, right? I know people paying upwards of £100 a month. Mine is less than like 15. And I'm not saying that as any way that I'm good at it or they're bad at it, but you know, if you're paying £100 a month, that's £1,200 a year that you're losing. That's probably what, half of a month's wage? These are things that wouldn't have been there in the past. And yes, a phone is basically a necessity for today's modern world. And yes, finding a job does appear to be harder. Yes, the avenues that we have got are changing. But I've said this before. When it comes to technologies and shifts in business, trends, cultures, you have a couple of people. You have the early adopters, you have the mass adopters, or perhaps even the people who try second, and then it becomes really mainstream, then you get the people who get left behind. And I feel like when we look at the past, you know, we had things like the Industrial Revolution, we had things like, then we had the Technological Revolution, and it's like now we're in like a second technological revolution. And I just want to bring that as a point, because like I say, going back to the point of looking at this from a 21-year-old's perspective like I am, I understand our generation is in difficult times. I understand, for the older people watching, your generations were in difficult times. And I'm not saying this to say that the old people had it worse or the young people have it worse. I'm saying this to say we had different challenges, but it doesn't mean that either of our challenges are less valid. Now I just want to give one point to my younger people who may be feeling a bit demotivated. And I want my older people in the comment section to correct me if I'm wrong. But was it so common, and I know it's still rare, but was it so proportionally common in the 50s, 60s, 80s to see self-made millionaires, self-made at age 21, 25? Probably not. I'm not saying that everybody can do this, or even that everybody should. I know a lot of people, when I speak about comments like this, say, well, internet businesses are unsustainable, making money online is a waste of time. These are often the people who didn't even try to do these things, or have no comprehension of how they even work. I'm not saying an online business is stable, but what I'm saying is this. The concept of being a self-made millionaire as a child or a young adult, it's a modern thing for a lot of people, brought about by the advent of technology and all of its benefits. Was the world easier in the past? Well, it may have been easier to follow a predestined path, but don't think that means that life was easier as a whole. Even if workers' unions were stronger, which there is an argument that they were, even if house prices were cheaper, we're talking smaller houses, go back past the 1950s, and a lot of these houses didn't even have indoor toilets in the UK, right? Just one example of how you may think that things were better, but smaller houses, worse quality, less energy efficient. Jobs, a lot of the time, were physical. And I'm not saying this to be rude or mean, because I don't even think I would want to do it, but I don't think that many people these days would either want to or even have the ability to do a 8 to 10 to 12 hour a day, 5-day a week physical shift. And they don't have to. The past, in a lot of ways, was better. There are a lot of things from the past years that we will never get back. At the same time, there are a lot of things that we're living in now, a lot of benefits that we have in today's world, through technology, through modernization, through evolution in a way, not necessarily in our physiology, but in our mentality, in our, I guess, culture, that bring us forwards. We have a lot of challenges today. No lie about that. No hesitation about that. But there are still opportunities for those who want to take it. You can now make money online and live halfway around the world. You can become a self-made millionaire on the internet. You can still find cheaper houses elsewhere, all whilst doing the same thing, even in the UK. And I'm not saying that's ideal, but if we look for smaller homes, more proportionate investments to what we need, we may still not be able to make it like previous generations could. But that's why we need to use our unique advantages. When I make a video like this, a lot of people in the comment section say, well, you just think it was better back, or you think today's difficult. I don't make the rules. I'm just some guy on the internet. You guys don't even know who I am. A lot of you guys are probably watching this channel for the first time. And I want to say hello to you. But my point is this, I am not anybody. I'm just another guy trying to get by. I don't make the rules, but we all have to play by them. We can't do much to change where we are today, but we can change our mentality and our response to it. And that perhaps may start by just acknowledging not everything was better in the past. Some things were, some things weren't. And a lot of things today are unimaginably better than any point in history. Let's take our advantages and work with them. It's not about looking at the past with nostalgia, because we can't bring it back. Let's look at where we are now and work based around that. Thank you. I'll see you again soon.